Welcome back to another build guide. Today we'll be going over a poison build featuring Flurry and Rain of Arrows, and this just might be my favorite build I've played so far. This build excels in its mobility, crowd control, and deletes everything off your screen with Rain of Arrows and poison damage. Although this build is insane for mobbing, its boss damage is a bit on the lower side, but once you stagger the dungeon boss it goes by pretty quick. With that being said, it's still a super fun build to play, and I've really been enjoying it. As normal, in this video we'll be going over the playstyle, skill tree, gear, powers, and the Paragon board, starting off with the skills and playstyle. For the skills, we'll be using Poison Trap, Dash, Flurry, Poison Imbue, Rain of Arrows, and Puncture. This is what I personally like to run, but Poison Trap and Dash can be changed to what skills you enjoy. Cold Imbue and Smoke Grenade are some good options for some extra crowd control, and Shadow Step is amazing if you're farming Hell Tides or lower tier dungeons to really fly around the mobs. As for the specialization, it is pretty situational. Preparation allows us to quickly cycle our cooldowns, but combo points is also a very good option. With Flurry, combo points gives you an attack speed buff, and with Rain of Arrows it does have a pretty slow casting speed, so the extra attack speed makes it feel a lot smoother. But when it comes to bosses, I would recommend swapping to combo points. It does really increase the boss damage. Now, as for our core skill, the obvious answer would be to run Rapid Fire for the energy regen that one of the nodes provides, to quickly cycle through Rain of Arrows as seen in Woody Joe's ROA build. However, the reason why I decided to go Flurry is it has great crowd control and synergy with the Flicker Step boots that are a core item of this build. As dashing through enemies subtracts up to 4 seconds of its active cooldown per enemy dash through, with Flurry we also get a stun on our next attack for dashing through an enemy. As for Puncture, this is how we keep our energy up. We go a lot into Lucky Hit in this build, and Rogue's passive, Innervation, gets proc pretty often, so we can refill our energy pretty quickly. So a normal skill cycle would be to engage with your evade, Flurry to stun, dash out, and cast Rain of Arrows, and that should eliminate any packs of mobs on your screen. While Rain of Arrows is down, evade and stun your way through packs until it's back up. Poison Imbued Flurry does do quite a bit of damage on its own, so you're not completely helpless to packs of elites while Rain of Arrows is on cooldown. And now for our skill tree. Starting off, we pick up Fundamental Puncture, then we go 5 into Flurry with Enhanced Flurry, which gives us some very nice sustain while we're mobbing, and because of that we don't need to go into Siphoning Strikes. Then Advanced Flurry gives us that stun after evading that I was talking about a little bit earlier. 3 into Sturdy, 3 into Stutter Step. Stutter Step just gives us some more movement speed and also gives us some more attack speed because of one of the Vampiric Powers that we use. Then we go 3 into Weapon Mastery, 1 point into Dash, 1 into Poison Trap with Subverting Poison Trap to just give us some extra poison damage. And I only really use Poison Trap against bosses. Other than that, it's not really needed in the build. Then we go 1 into Exploit, 3 into Malice, 3 into Precision Imbuement, 1 point into Shadow Imbuement with Mixed Shadow Imbuement, which is really nice with Rain of Arrows because it's going to be imbued with all 3 skills. It applies the shadow on the first wave of arrows, and then the second wave comes and just does even more damage. Then 5 into Poison Imbuement, picking up Blended Poison Imbuement, 3 into Deadly Venom, 2 into Debilitating Toxins, and then pick up this entire cluster here of Innervation, Alchemist's Fortune, and Second Wind. Now, Lucky Hit is a really big point in this build, so it's really nice to get all this Lucky Hit, and then Innervation is our main source of energy sustain. Then moving on, of course, we pick up all 3 of Rain of Arrows, and for our Mastery passive, I'm going with Close Quarters. And onto our gear. Starting off with our armor, for the helmet we have 2 options. Andriel's Visage feels amazing with its unique effect, and is a huge DPS increase. However, the lifesteal from my experience doesn't get applied with damage over time, and by going with this, we do become far more squishy. So if you're just farming and happen to have this uber unique, I recommend it, but for higher tier dungeons, your survivability may feel pretty poor. For a tankier setup, I would go for a legendary helmet with ranks to Poison and View, cooldown reduction, total armor, and any resistance roll with the aspect Noxious Ice. For your chestplate, go for life, armor, damage reduction, another resistance roll with the aspect Disobedience. For the gloves, we want ranks to Flurry, Lucky Hit Chance, and Crit Chance. For the 4th roll, attack speed feels good, but also having resource regen on Lucky Hit helps a bit. For the aspect Get Bursting Venoms, this gets procced pretty often and is a must-have for the build, as we are investing really in only poison damage, and we don't have Poison Imbue or Rain of Arrows up, we barely do any damage. For the pants, We have a damage and a tanky option similarly to the helmet. If you're wanting damage, go for Tybalt's Will. The 40% damage multiplier will be up pretty much all the time. However, for higher dungeon, I'd get pants with life, armor percent, and the last two rolls go for resistances. And for your aspect, go for might for some more damage reduction. And as I mentioned previously, for our boots, we're using Flicker Step. These allow us to evade often and reset rain of arrows insanely fast. And on top of that, all the preset stats are a very nice bonus. Next up is weapons. For the two-hand, I'm using a bow. A crossbow will hit harder, but the faster attack speed that comes with using a bow is just too good to give up. The stats go for dex, ultimate skill damage, damage over time, and damage to crowd-controlled enemies. And go ahead and place the aspect of corruption here. The 80% imbued skill potency is a huge damage increase to our poison. For our melee weapons, I recommend going daggers. I am using one sword at the moment as I just happen to have the sword with decent rolls. For the stats, go for dex, ultimate skill damage, damage over time, and damage to crowd-controlled enemies with the aspect pestilent points. Pestilent points just fits right into this build, and it can also activate bursting venoms. For the other hand, I'm using Ashira's. Ashira's feels super good, giving more lucky hit chance and increased attack speed with its unique effect. And if you happen to have Doombringer and are wanting to feel a lot more tanky, it does feel pretty good with this build. And finally, the jewelry. For the amulet, we're going to go with Word of Hakan, which has gotten a buff in this recent season and has become a very strong unique, and it is a core item of the build. All the preset stats are amazing, and having Rain of Arrows imbued with all three imbuements makes it hit like a truck. For our rings, on one ring, I'm using X-Falls. Its preset stats fit very nicely into the build, and its unique effect, Lucky Hit, giving your damage over time, a 50% chance to erupt, doing 41,000 of the damage of the same type to nearby enemies, hit super hard with how much we're going into poison damage. And for the other ring, go for Lucky Hit, poison damage, damage over time, and the last roll either go for life, crit chance, or damage to crowd-controlled enemies, with the aspect Encircling Blades allowing for Flurry to hit all around you. And lastly, for the gem sockets, on your armor, get rubies for extra life, diamonds on your weapons for extra ultimate skill damage, and in your jewelry sockets, if you're lacking resistances, go ahead and balance them out here, or if your resistances are capped somehow, go for skulls. And now for this season's mechanic, the Vampiric Powers. Up first is Metamorphosis, turning our evade into a mini dash, giving us 4 seconds of unstoppable and applying vampiric curses to enemies that are evaded through. Next is Flowing Veins, giving a 60% multiplier to our damage over time to enemies that are moving or affected by a vampiric curse. And since we're dashing through enemies with Metamorphosis pretty often, this damage buff is up all the time. Anticipation gives us 20% cooldown reduction to Rain of Arrows, and a 12% damage increase for each nearby enemy that is poisoned. Ravenous for the attack speed just makes the build feel smoother. And for the last power, you have a few options. Undying if you're needing some more healing, Resilience for some more damage reduction, or if you're feeling tanky enough for the content you're wanting to do, Domination and Prey on the Weak are good options for mobbing. And lastly, Infection if you're wanting to increase your boss damage. And lastly, we have the Paragon Boards. So to quickly go over it, starting with the glyphs, we're picking up Tracker, Efficacy, Control, Infusion, Bane, and Exploit. As for the legendary nodes, we get Eldritch Bounty, Cheap Shot, and No Witnesses. And No Witnesses did get a buff in this recent season, making it so all your additive ultimate skill damage gets applied to this node, which comes out to be actually a pretty big damage increase. And that pretty much sums up the board. There will be a link to the D4 builds that goes over all the gear, stat priority, and the Paragon boards, so you guys can follow it more closely. And with that, we sum up today's build guide. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions or improvements on the build, feel free to comment below. I wanted to quickly shout out a friend of mine that made this sick channel banner, and she does do commissions, so if you're wanting to have anything done, I would hit her up. Links will be in the description. Other than that, I have a ton more builds planned for this season, so leave a like on this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on those. That's all for today. Remember to have fun and take care.